Welcome to the Kratom Sobriety Podcast. My name is Charlie, and thanks for joining us today. A couple of announcements. We have a long waiting list of folks who filled out our Google form, so please be patient. There's over 40 people on the list, so it's going to take us a good almost a year to get through it. And so stay on your path of quitting Kratom, and hopefully we'll get to everybody eventually. And today's guest is very exciting. It's somebody who developed an app for quitting Kratom. And it's really amazing how many more resources there are out there from when we started out the podcast 3 years ago. For example, one of our early podcast episodes was like on Kratom book reviews. And at the time, there was like maybe 2 books. And now if you go on Amazon, there's over a dozen books. And some of them are like AI junk, but there's actually some very interesting titles out there, including a new one that's a 12-step book that echoes the voice of the big book that Alcoholics Anonymous use. So today we have a guest, Pasha, who developed his own app and also has a quitting story. So sorry for that long introduction, but how are you doing, Pasha?
I'm doing well. That was a throwback. I actually remember those first 2 books on Amazon back in the day. The one with the huge leaf on the front of it. It's awesome to see that there are a lot more resources now available.
I think the very first one was My Kratom Hell, which was riddled with typos and stuff, but it was literally the only thing available for years. So why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself to the audience?
Yeah. Hello, everybody. My name is Pasha. And also, thank you for having me. This is so cool. This is actually one of the first times I get to speak openly to like-minded people about the entire process and what kind of we've all gone through. But a quick word about me. I have been a very creative person. I've been building for my entire life. I was running a production studio in New York for about a decade. Then I moved abroad where I was doing photography in Paris. And then COVID hit, which is really the crux of where I got in trouble with Kratom. And continuing forward, I started actively searching for, at the time of COVID, I started actively searching for ways that I could work remotely. And I've always been very technically minded. And so I started to tinker with front-end design, with coding, and that actually led me to building the foundation of what I do now, which is create digital products. And that's really been my focus for the past, I want to say, 2.5 years. And most recently, I did create an app, but we can get to that later.
And another part of your quitting journey, you're a taperer, and we haven't had a lot of those stories on. But before we get into that, why don't you tell us a little bit about the fun side of you? What do you do to relax or to live it up?
Relax and live it up. So I most recently moved countries, but also moved states. So I haven't had that big of a social circle. I would say I hang out with friends, I go to movies, and I do normal human stuff. But here it's really been growing that in Texas, actually, where I'm at. I've been playing a lot of guitar. I love classical guitar, and I've had a lot of time to really focus on developing that part of me. I'm also reaching the age where horticulture has become fun. I've been growing plants all around the apartment, but I live right on the edge of a nature preserve. And so it's a lot of walks in nature. And I've been quite lucky to live where I live. But yeah, that's sort of me. And also spending lovely time with my wife, obviously.
And excuse me if you heard a window closing while Pasha was talking, that was me. It looks like my neighbors are going to start mowing their lawn. So at least they'll reduce the sound the rest of the interview. When is your Kratom quit date?
Yeah, so that was actually quite recent. It was last year in December. It was the full jump off date. Yeah.
So going on 7 months now.
Yep. And this last period was, you said, taperer, which is also, it was something new for me because a lot of journeys are similar, but you start and stop and start and stop. And my go-to was cold turkey usually. And that just has been really brutal for me in the past. And tapering was something that I wanted to try, and a very different experience, but ultimately got me to where I needed to be.
Why don't you tell us about when you first encountered Kratom?
Yeah, I was living in Brooklyn, and right around the corner, there was a kava bar. And I was like, this is kind of cool. So I jumped into the kava bar, and I've always been very literary minded, and I was writing at the time, and I saw these people with books and conversing, and I was like, oh my God, these are my people. And I had no idea what kava was. I had no idea what kratom was. And it just clicked with me. And I thought it was the absolute greatest thing in the world because I'm more social. I am just as productive. I can drive a car. I can continue to do my work. And in the morning, I don't have a hangover. And that was, in just pharmacologically speaking, everybody has their chemical that their body just forms with really well. And kratom was just that thing. I was like, wow, yes. Like my entire, like a full body, yes, this is the stuff. And at that time, it was quite sporadic use just because it's like the difference between, I'd say, vaping and smoking. Smoking, you need to go outside and you can't do it indoors, but vaping, you can continuously consume the thing. And so because I had to go to a separate location, a bar, it kept the usage habits quite variegated and enough that I wasn't really suffering any consequences. Like I would go once or twice a week and it was fine. I would go for a trip for a month abroad and I was fine. And so I never had that association with it being something that would bite me in the butt.
Was there a point where you started buying it on your own and that's when it crossed the line?
Yeah, obviously that was the next thing. I was like, okay, it wasn't even due to the fact that I wanted to consume more. I wanted to save some money. And so I was like, okay, it's the same thing. You can go to a bar and have a beer or you can buy a 6-pack. And so I found a couple of resellers and I would order the powder itself and the usage increased, but just due to lifestyle, I still never had any negative benefits. It was COVID that really got me, and I'd be happy to get into that as well.
That's a very common thread of a lot of our guests. Before we talk about the escalation of your kratom use, do you have any history of past addiction?
To be honest, no, but I have always been a person that developed habits easily. So good habits or bad habits. And if my social life was getting out of hand and I was constantly partying, I would just be able to, okay, now for the next 6 months, I'm not drinking at all. After going through a spurt where I found it negatively impacting my life. But no real trouble with nicotine, none of the usual subjects. But yeah, I'm very easy to develop a habit for sure.
Okay. Yeah, I'm a creature of extremes too. Like work, I can get really workaholic, or the one thing I should do is get really extreme at the gym. That would be very helpful.
That's the next one. Yeah, for sure. I'm actually the exact same way. And jujitsu, I became super obsessed with jujitsu, and until that led to an injury. It's just, you got to find the happy medium, and I've been really bad at that usually.
So once you left Kratom Kava bars and started buying Kratom on your own during the pandemic, what happened then?
Yeah, so during the pandemic, there was all of the stress of, okay, so I was working as a photographer, constantly interacting with people, constantly working on various projects, and all of a sudden you are not allowed to come within a couple feet of somebody else. Obviously, that was bad for business. And locked in a room, locked with a minimal social contact. And I was in Amsterdam at the time. And that's also a country where it's legal and you can easily find it. And so I was like, oh, there's that one thing. I'd prefer not to drink to pass my time, and it's making it more difficult to even search for another job. I remembered I loved kratom, and I can get it here. After a few months, I think it was like 2 or 3 months, it's right about that plateau where it stops having any sort of euphoric effect. It was doing its job. It relieved the stress. It allowed me to send 1,000,001 job resumes out. But at a certain point, I was like, it's not doing anything for me anymore. And this is stupid. Why am I continuing to consume it? Let me just stop. And so I did. And at that point is when I quickly realized that I've never had physical pain as debilitating as when I stopped basically taking kratom. And I had no idea what was happening to me at the time. And I was like, this is really strange. Am I getting sick? What the hell is going on? And as soon as I took another dose of kratom, it was the magic button that literally just stopped all of the pain immediately. And so talk about a reinforcement mechanism. It's okay, you're in pain and this is the panacea. This is the cure-all. And immediately realized that was an issue for me and tried to get off it, and I just couldn't.
And what kind of product were you using? Like, how often were you doing it at your most?
I think at my most I was doing I've always kept it to powder. I've experimented with extracts, but again, they're very expensive and it's just not economically viable if you are planning or have been consuming for a long term. So around 20 to 25 grams per day, maybe a little bit more. I don't think I ever exceeded 30 grams per day though. But that was the baseline for me. Yeah.
And what were some of the signs other than the pain that escalated and then the withdrawals? What was some of the things that, wow, I really need to get off this?
I felt like I lost control of my free will. And I felt like I put myself in this cage, or I have been put. It was a very confusing time, but I realized that I'm now beholden to this thing, and there is an extreme consequence of me even considering quitting it. And you will be fledged and whipped for even thinking about not purchasing it and doing it again. And I became extremely frustrated with myself. And then there's the shame. And then I've never considered myself an addict. Am I an addict? Am I broken? X, Y, and Z. And so there's this flood of shame and also fear of the consequence, and also just not understanding what was happening to me at that time. And no matter what I did, and I never made it over, again, I would quit cold turkey and I would never make it over any sort of threshold where I would feel any sort of relief. And so I would constantly quit before things would start getting better. And so I thought I legitimately broke myself to the point that I'm just going to have to live with kratom in my system for the rest of time. And that was just a very bleak thing to think about, especially if you haven't even talked to anybody about it to explain what's going on. So yeah, it was scary. It was a very scary time.
Did you ever participate in pro-kratom culture or was exposed to that at all?
No, because I don't really know what pro-kratom culture is other than the bars in Brooklyn, which was, hey, we'll make a little milkshake for you or like this cocktail with kratom in it, and we'll sit around and have a good time and read some tarot cards. Actually, I would say yes. Early on, I met a lot of people who were recovering heroin addicts. And they have said that kratom was a lifesaver for them. And I'm not going to fault them for it. If you found something that works, and it's really, because that's a whole nother can of worms that's dangerous to open. And so I have met a lot of people who have found benefit and kind of swore by it. But also, they lived at the kava bar. It's like you're switching one thing for another, and I don't know.
Yeah, and I've always been probably doing kratom is safer than IV drug use and or buying drugs off the street, especially with but maybe for a normal everyday American that's buying stuff from over the counter or from a smoke shop, then that comparison might be way more dangerous. You said that at one point you felt really broken. And why don't you talk about from that point to your attempts to start quitting?
Yeah, and that feeling arose from my inability to just take the situation into my own hands. And I've always been a person who carved out my own path in life. If there wasn't a challenge that was difficult enough, I would fabricate a challenge for myself so I could overcome it. And it's something that I've always prided myself on, is the ability to take risk and overcome it and have a sense of pride from that. And this was really the first thing that was defeating me at every single stage. And I started reading the literature. I started reading, just understanding what was happening to my body. I got really deep into the science of addiction and the science of recovery. And I started reading a lot of recovery-focused books. I remember Russell Brand's book about his own personal recovery and I really put myself in that category of people. And maybe I am in the category of an addict. But at that time, I just didn't think I would have the ability to overcome the basically extreme pain it would take to stop consuming. And and I was constantly on the Reddit forums, and people say have I broken my brain? Have I fried my synapses to the point where I will just be a different person. And I was fearing for that outcome. It's, man, have I really screwed my life over at large due to the fact that now this is a part of me and it's an inexorable part of me and I can't get rid of it. And so that was really where that feeling started to come from. And it was debilitating to say the least.
The first times you tried to quit, what did those look like?
Just, can I swear?
Yes, yes.
It was just ass. It was just eating shit sandwiches every day. The most unexpected things. It's like just intense cold sweats, intense body aches. What was crazy, so at the time, and this was at COVID, my girlfriend at the time, she was a massage therapist. And so obviously with the withdrawal and the body aches, you would think that is what an incredible thing for recovery. But the thing is, the pain was so deep that the massages themselves wouldn't help. And at a certain point, and this is when I started communicating with my girlfriend at the time, and I was able to at least share my experience, which actually helped it so much to actually talk about what I was going through. And at a certain point, I was like, look, I'm either going to quit this or I'm going to die, but I'm stopping. And I don't know what the next week or what the next 2 weeks, and I've heard that post-acute withdrawal syndrome lasts for 6 months. I don't know how long this is going to go, but please stay with me for this period of time and let's try to get through it together. And it was, many nights of fragmented sleep, just randomly sweating, like zero thermoregulation. Forget thermoregulation. You're outside and it's 100 degrees out. You're cold. You're inside and it's super cold under the AC and you're sweating bullets because you're too hot. It was wild.
When you first emailed us, from our last episode or a recent episode, you said that you really related to the line, "There are no points for heroism."
Yeah.
Why did that resonate with you?
Yeah, that was JP's episode. He sounds like a really cool guy. I tried doing it by myself and not tell anybody about it because I was still going about my day to day. I was working, I was doing a lot of things, I was staying productive. I had obligations, I had places to be, like people to see, but I was going through withdrawal and I tried to just white knuckle through it and I just couldn't do it. And so I tried to be this person that's, I will just not say a word and you'll see me in a month, and I would have kicked it. And I wasn't getting any benefit from that whatsoever. It was only making the entire process that much more difficult. And when I stopped trying to be this invincible individual that wasn't even being afflicted by a very serious process that was going on in the body, it just made the process that much easier when I was able to talk about it with my girlfriend at the time, but also a couple of close friends that were really supportive. And it was a lot easier to just not carry that extra weight that was entirely unnecessary.
Why don't you tell us about how you finally eventually tapered off? How did that work?
Yeah, tapering off, again, this is something that I'll put it to you this way. I did cold turkey so many times and I got caught in the bear trap of starting again and thinking I was strong enough to overcome it and I'll regulate it better this time and I can do it. I am the hero that can succeed. And I have not been the hero ever in regarding to Kratomans. I just didn't want to go through like a proper cold turkey quit at that time. And this is exactly the time when I started looking for tools to track tapering. And I realized that there weren't any tools and I was using this rudimentary process of I was consuming the raw powder with a teaspoon, basically. And so every time I would take some, I would just do a notch. And so at the end of the day, I would have 6 or 7 notches. And then I would tomorrow, I knew nothing about tapering. I was like, tomorrow I'll do 1 less notch and then I'll be done with the week. And I realized that is just the most idiotic way to do it. And that's just not how the body works. And after a number of times of failure with that, I realized, okay, I need to get a scale and I need to do this properly. And I started researching tapering. And that's what ultimately drew me to create a tool specific to tapering. And I was actually using the thing that I built throughout the process. But the tapering is a little bit different because in cold turkey, you can just pull the ripcord and you're done in a week and a half or 2 weeks. And there's the gradual fall off, but it happens fairly quickly. With tapering, there's a pervasive, I would say, anhedonia. So everything just becomes, at least for me, everything just became boring. but I wasn't in extreme pain. And so with the boredom, I just tried to combat that as I was like, okay, I'm going to stick with the taper, and I've done the research. I know the plan. I know how many weeks this is going to be. Let me just stick with it. And no matter what, this is going to be the thing. And yeah, I was just bored.
Okay.
And that was a far easier battle to overcome than day 3 of not having a minute of sleep and just sweating through your bed sheets every single night. And yeah, that just ended up working. And I got to a point where I finally was just able to jump off. And it's been good ever since. And so it worked for me. I think both things have a place to be. And it really depends on what type of person you are. So me and you are most likely all or nothing type people. And that's why cold turkey could be a good route for you. I decided to go a slightly different path, and that just happened to work as well. Neither are like silver bullets. It's going to suck for a little bit either way, but the tapering path worked really well. It's just you have to understand that you're going to be on it for a little bit longer, because a proper taper path is from 6 weeks at a minimum. You can do probably less, but again, the more aggressive the taper, the more physical pain you're going to be going through, as opposed to just a general malaise, if you will. But yeah.
I was an extract user, so it also might be related to product type, but I found that once I had any kratom in my system that day, I lost all self-control. The best I could hope for was delaying my first use until noon, and that would be a victory. So that I ended up being a cold turkey person. Though I did a rapid taper, like I don't recommend anybody to jump from their highest dose. Even if you do a 3-day, 4-day and step down, it's a lot less painful than going from your highest dose. So I don't know if you remember what you're starting at the beginning of your taper, where you were at, and then how many weeks you went. What was your step down plan?
Yeah, and this is the way that I built the app itself. And honestly, I'm not trying to plug the app. I'm just telling you how I was thinking about my own taper process. And so I did extensive research on what medically backed taper strategies exist, as opposed to the anecdotal evidence versus just generally speaking how just all taper strategies works in terms of a very gentle one as opposed to a more aggressive one. And the one that I chose for myself was I believe it's called a step down taper, where, so for instance, if you start at say 20 grams, you're going to take a huge step, relatively speaking. You would step down to about 16 grams. And then you allow for 3 to 4 days of just coasting at that particular amount of kratom powder per day. And what that does is it allows your body you have that initial shock, but then it normalizes and it becomes a little bit more manageable, as opposed to an incremental step every single day where your body almost can't catch up. And so you're almost in this inertia state of discomfort, as opposed to you have a small shock, you normalize, and then bam, you do an incremental step down again. And depending on how gentle or aggressive you want to go with, that is the one way to do it. You have also a very gentle taper, which goes to 12 to 14 weeks. It could be even longer than that. It really depends on what I found, lifestyle. If you have a high stress job or a place that you really can't afford to not perform at your best, then obviously something a little bit longer, yeah, it's going to be longer, but at the end of it, you're going to be off, right? Or as opposed to, I'm so frustrated with this, I just want to quit as fast as possible, but how do I make the slope just a little bit more manageable? You have more aggressive ways. But I explored all of those different options, and I have built that in algorithmically into the app itself, just because what exists on the market right now are just very linear tapers. It's okay, you start at 20 and then you have incremental doses at each day. There's no stepping, there's no holding, there's no anything. It's just a linear taper, less and less, until you're off it completely. There's no jumping. There's basically none of the, at least by anecdotal evidence, none of the strategies that people using kratom have used that have said have been really successful for them. And so I tried to incorporate a lot of that, as well as just more classical, medically backed taper styles.
Why don't you just tell us about your app?
This was during the time when I was really starting to put a lot of digital products up on their feet. And I tried to have my kratom use under control, and I failed once again. And I was like, okay, I can't afford to get trapped in this again. How do I stop? And because I was in that world, I started looking for just the digital tools that exist to this day. And there have been a lot more things that are on the market that can maybe help, but there wasn't anything that was like made specifically for the nuanced experience of a kratom user that is trying to either taper or quit cold turkey. And so my product's name is Kratom Cut. It's for iOS only right now, but if enough people complain, I promise I will spend the entire weekend and I'll make the Android version. But it focuses on various taper strategies or a cold turkey function that really guides you through the milestones of quitting from day one, basically jumping off. Because a lot of the products on the market, I don't want to poo-poo them, but they're glorified timers. It's, hey, press this button and you've been sober for 2.5 minutes and good for you. It doesn't put any of the experience into any sort of contextual framework to understand. But I was primarily focusing on tapering because that was a little bit more of a difficult thing to do really well, just because there's nothing on the market other than a linear taper tool. And so I was doing the research. I handwrote all of the algorithms to match what people have been finding real success with. And then I started using it. I tried to figure out like all the things that were missing. I basically built the app for me while I was actively tapering. And so one of the things that was important for me was, one, visualizing where I am. Having the ability to edit on the fly. If I take a little bit more, if I take a little bit less, maybe I was a little bit too aggressive in the taper. I want to have all that functionality easily editable so I can tailor the experience for me personally. And one of the most beneficial things that I found through my own process was just deeply understanding what was happening to my body, deeply understanding what the kratom plant is, deeply understanding what all of these different things are. And so I even put an entire learn section in the app that are just a number of different articles that are heavily cited. And so you can go and jump to the PubMed article where I'm pulling a lot of this information, or the different articles. I basically want this to be like a comprehensive place that you can go to track the journey with ease. And obviously it has dark mode and widgets. Yeah.
And how do you protect users' privacy?
Yeah. So I was deliberating back and forth, and I was talking with other developers, and they're like, wait, you don't track anything at all? I was like, no, this is not that app. And I was getting a lot of pushback actually, because I can't even track analytics of usage. But basically everything stays on phone. There's no, I can send the entire list, but it's super extensive in how much data I don't collect. No push notifications, no registering, no cloud backups. You can wipe the entire history with the click of a button. It's the most private app that you can make on an iPhone, and you could probably even push the envelope a little bit more. I think the App Store tracks the amount of downloads, but that's basically where the information stops.
Great. And right now, is there any costs associated with the app?
Yeah. So the cost itself is, there's a 2-week free trial. So you can play around with it for about 2 weeks. And you have 2 options of paying. I think it's $5 per month or $20 lifetime usage. And so you can keep it as long as you want. And I'm planning on fully building out a lot more features. And so if you go that route, I'm such a bad salesman. You're basically future-proofing like all of the other functionality. I want to add AI functionality, so it takes all of the context of your journey. It's okay, I'm on day 2.5 of my cold turkey, going down from this amount of grams. What is happening to my body? And so I want to have the AI kind of integrated and understand what's happening so it can give you that real-time feedback just to ground you in, hey, this is where you're at and it's going to get better.
Yeah. And I'm on an Android. So the only program that's available is something called Kratom Free. So I'm excited to maybe eventually see if it gets onto Android. Don't do an all-nighter just for me. But
if you get more than one email saying, hey, we would love to have this on Android, there are some all-nighters in my future.
and I'm sure are like 80% of people use iPhone? I don't know.
Again, I was scratching my own itch.
I'm
an iPhone user, and also from just a technical standpoint, I was interested in, I've never done iOS application development before, and so I was just curious. I was like, hey, put two and two together and I could use it on my iPhone. There were some options to write it in a specific language that would be able to be both on iPhone and Android. But again, it's not as good as creating something specifically for that platform. But I'm honestly saying if I'm still collecting the data as to what the split is for iPhone versus Android, and if the majority of people are Android, I want to get this out to people.
My quick search, it looks like it's 58% iPhone. So you got the bulk of the market.
By an 8% margin. But hey, look, this app went live about 2 weeks ago.
Oh,
I've had beta testers and they've been giving me fantastic feedback, but I'd be more than happy to give free access codes we can figure out the number of your audience. And if anybody's interested just to test drive it, just to tell us what you like, what you don't like, more than happy to comp some access codes.
Please email the show at kratomsobriety@gmail.com, and I will share the emails with Pasha. And when we've done similar things in the past, we weren't bombarded with email, so it'll probably be a limited demand for that.
Hey, that means if you email, you are guaranteed a free access code.
Yeah. If somehow there's 100 emails, it gets too crazy and blow my mind away.
Hey.
And of course, that's also, if you're listening to this in the summer of 2027, the offer probably expired at that point too. So
you never know. You never know. I might still have some access codes next year.
Yeah, that's true. We do have about 1,000 people that listen every week to the current episode. And then about another 1,000 people listen to the back catalog. But it seems anecdotally, we hear that people binge it while they're withdrawing.
Look, it's super helpful. One of the biggest things that I've used was just the Quitting Kratom subreddit. It got me through the worst of it when I realized that, hey, I'm not going crazy and I'm not broken. It's just a temporary thing that I need to overcome. But yeah, it's incredibly powerful and helpful.
Yeah, so why don't you tell us how the beginning of the year went off, your first 90 days off of Kratom. What did you experience?
It's interesting because I have lived in countries where Kratom is very illegal. And when I would stop using and I would return to whatever country I was living in at that point, and it wasn't available, I didn't have that constant nagging feeling of, hey, this is an option for you to pass your time. And so it has been a lot easier in those circumstances to not even think about a usage. Here in the United States, it's far more easy. It's on every street corner. You can order it easily. And the first 90 days was just an exercise in how can I rebuild the synapses in a more healthy way? How can I run more? How can I go to the gym more frequently? It was basically finding... I'm sorry, I have to let my cat out. She's screaming right now. One second.
Go for it.
Sorry about that. Yeah, it was the first 90 days was... how do I get to this new normal, and how do I keep myself busy and finding joy in the smaller things in life? And I tried not to switch to, what am I doing this weekend? Should I drink? I really tried to focus on not replacing the thing with another thing.
Yeah.
And yeah, it was just dealing with I really hate boredom. And that has, I think I was listening to some either psychologist or doctor, and they were basically dissecting the framework of an addict and the necessity for novelty in those types of individuals. The threshold is so much higher. And this is why those people usually excel in environments where there's high variance. So very dynamic environments where you're constantly doing new things. This is probably why photography was great for me, because I was constantly on a new set with a new person and constantly working on new projects. And because I'm working behind a computer right now, it was really trying to figure out what I can become, quote unquote, obsessed with that fulfilled me in a more wholesome way. But yeah, I would say it was, for me personally, it was just dealing with trying to fight off the boredom in a healthy way and trying not to think about kratom at all. I'm sorry if this is coming out circuitous. I basically wanted to say that in a country where it's not an option, I was totally fine. I wasn't thinking about it at all because it's not an option. Here, it's calling to me out my window. And it's just saying the hard no and trudging forward.
Did you have any close calls in the last 6 months? Any like where you really had strong cravings and you thought about?
Of course. It's always the same. It's always, I remember when I started using and I could use a little bit and it was a productivity booster and I was fine. And now you're gone through the thick of it and you'll be fine if you try it again. And that is such a pernicious thing that I just I can't trust myself anymore. So it's just really been saying the hard no. It's just removing it fully from my reality of possible things that could even be. It's like, I'm just not touching this stuff anymore. And that's it. That's it. And this is a passing thought. And maybe I should go for a walk or water my plants.
What are some of the benefits now that you're off kratom? What are your favorite sides of quitting?
Man, I really hope this is similar for other people, but I don't sleep for the 9 hours I used to. Because with kratom, you have basically the best sleep of your life, but you can sleep for 12 hours straight. And so I really felt like I have a huge portion of my life back. I can wake up super early. I actually wake up bright-eyed and bushy-tailed and ready to conquer the day. That has been a huge benefit. Another benefit is inspiration and moments of awe seem real when I experience them now, as opposed to inducing them with kratom. I basically remember you have this euphoria when you take kratom, but the thing is, when you stop and you fully cleanse it from your system and you have those experiences again of a beautiful sunset, for instance, and it might be banal and stupid, but bear with me. You feel it far deeper within yourself and it feels real, which has been really wild to experience and remember what those types of experiences are. The list can go on and on. One of the biggest things, it's okay, I use kratom for productivity gains, but yeah, up until the point where you needed to take another dose. And now I find myself just greater concentration for extended periods of time, basically, which has been great for work.
All right. Towards the end of the interview, we like to talk about some of the fun things in life. Now that you have more time and money, do you have any plans to see live music or any travel in your future?
Yeah, actually, my wife and I are going to scope out Colorado. We have been really looking forward to doing some traveling while we're in this part of the country, and Colorado is one of those places. And in addition to that, I've been my new thing is, I don't know if it's like the YouTube algorithm, but the YouTube algorithm has been feeding me a lot of motorcycle content. And I've been looking to get a little motorcycle. And I used to ride when I was like 18 or 19 years old. And so I want to get back into that. But those are the things. I want to see the mountains. Looking forward to that. My little sister is actually visiting us from Georgia. And so we're going to a concert next week. And it's funny because she's a Zoomer. And I have no idea what they're listening to nowadays. And we're going to this experimental avant-garde Zoomer band concert. So really looking forward to that. Yeah, it's just those small things. Yeah.
Other than your app, are there any tools or advice that you would recommend to people?
It's a very personal journey for every single person. The one thing that I will say that if you're caught in this limbo where you don't think you are strong enough to stop, that's not true. It does get better after the first window of extreme suck, but it's not something that will conquer you. And that was something that I had to learn really the hard way. And it was like the most difficult part of the entire journey when you feel powerless to the thing. But once I went through it a few times, and obviously I probably shouldn't have ever touched it again, but I did. And so I went through cold turkey multiple times and relapses and blah, blah, blah. The biggest lesson was you are strong enough to stop. And that's the thing that I'm working on currently is continuing not to think about it at all. But practically speaking, resources like, I don't know, vitamin C is great. Vitamin C has been actually an extreme help. And what else? Yeah, just get past that first week. If you're going cold turkey, just get past that first week. That's all I can say.
Yeah. And is there anything more you'd like to say about your app?
About the app, right now I am just mostly interested in getting into people's hands and actually getting real world feedback from people who are like in the thick of it. I made it specifically for powder just because it's a lot easier to track. You can get the same powder from the same vendor. All you need is a scale and you can track it that way. I know we've been going through an epidemic of 7.0, and I'm currently working on options for that community as well, because that's a huge issue and a lot of people have been asking me for it. But mostly it's, yeah, reach out. I'm happy to send codes. I would love to get your feedback. If you're an Android user, just shout it out. It'll light a fire under my ass to make the app, and I'll be more than happy to. And if the significant amount of people are like or having trouble with 7.0, then I'll see what I can do. I actually have the research that I've been going through pulled up on another screen right now, and it just gets a little bit tricky with there's just so much variance in those types of products that it becomes difficult. But where there's a will, there's a way.
Yeah, the tapering on some of those I could see being a challenge. All right. And as we're about to say goodbye, is there any closing thoughts that you'd like to share with folks?
Just get past that first week. If you haven't really fully gone through it yet, there is a ceiling to the discomfort, but you'll soon realize that you can overcome even that. And as banal as that may sound, that's a reality, and it does get better. You haven't broken your brain. You will still be able to enjoy life, probably even more so on the other end of this, and just stay strong. And actually, there's one last thing that I wanted to say, and this is just a framing that really benefited me when I was going through it, is using any substance, but kratom in this instance was or is our best attempt to deal with the issue at present. It is our own way of dealing with stress or loneliness or overwhelm or whatever it may be. And yeah, people say go take a cold plunge, but sometimes that's not in the books, and you start using this thing and that's fine. It's okay. But what are you going to do about it now is the more important question, but there's no shame to carry here. This is and was our best attempt at dealing with whatever the problem was, and that's okay. And it's all okay, basically.
I really appreciate you coming on, sharing this additional resource to our audience with the rest of the year, and keep in touch. And I will be forwarding you any emails that we get about the app.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Charlie. And thank you for everybody for listening.